now, John?
Trying to solve the mysteries of the world.
Oh, by looking at these squiggly lines?
Yep.
That's interesting. You're Jake Gagne's crew chief here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean?
I'm doing double duty this week too.
Yeah?
Richard's pretty full, so I'm actually trying to do a little bit to take some of the load off of him with Cam.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Right on. So like I've given you nicknames and stuff. Superbike Sherpa. What's the other one? Right.
That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, what's your like? How do you gather what to tell the rider when he's telling you stuff?
How do I what?
How do you come up with what to give him feedback wise?
Or
when the rider tells you something, like how do you know exactly what to say?
It comes from being familiar with the riders, so you kind of know what their little insecurities are.
Insecurities?
Yeah, everybody has them, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and every rider has a little thing that, that they don't want to have happen to them when they're riding.
Okay.
And usually you're just trying to make sure that the bike is safe. Safe enough for them to go the speed they want. And if they're not able to get to that point without, feeling like they have to overextend themselves, and you work with them to try to bring that back down so that they can feel good and comfortable about going at that speed with a minimum of, let's just say, mental anguish, if you want to say it like that. But it's not really that. It's like they don't have to think about the consequences of a mistake. So you're trying to give them a motorcycle that will allow them to make a mistake and be able to recover from it. Gives them a big wide range, a lot of latitude when they want to ride. So
right,
working on that.
Like I know that you used to be, and you kind of still are, like an Ohlin's guy, right? Like how do you know and how do you balance between whether it's like a physical change on the suspension, or is it something with the squiggly line shit, you got to change something in the electronics? How do you decide that?
Well, a lot of the squiggly line shit is more about what the rider actually feels through their hands, because the suspension is just a filter.
Okay.
Right? And it's giving you the feedback on what's happening on the racetrack.
Right.
So if a rider comes back and he makes a comment about something regarding, how the bike feels, that usually indicates that there's too much feel for what he's comfortable with.
Okay. And
if he's not getting enough feel, he doesn't know where the limit is because the tires aren't, giving him enough feedback. What you're trying to do is you're trying to, get the riders actually to kind of work with you and talk with you about what they see on the racetrack and feel. And they can come back here and talk with us. And then we go to the data and we look at the patterns. We look at broad sections of the racetrack, because there's no point in just looking at one little spot.
Okay.
And there's no point in looking at one particular lap. In some cases you have to go back maybe 2 or 3 sessions so that you can bring up some data from when they didn't have the problem before, and now you're bringing it up and you have a problem area, and then you bring up another section of data from previous exits where there wasn't any problems. See what whether there's something that they're doing differently or how they're approaching, that particular area on the track and the corners, whatever. And, working with him to try to narrow down the problem area, because it's usually a fairly general comment. Like, for example, in this last exit with Cam, he came in and said it's chattering everywhere.
Right.
Right, but then you talk to him a little bit, you find out that it's only chattering in a couple of places, but it's chattering really badly there. And it's not in the places that we would usually expect, because we kind of know already where we would expect to have chatter on this racetrack.
Right.
And it's showing up in places where it shouldn't be.
Is that why you guys just swapped the tire?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
And like, how do you know that that's the thing, right? Like, how do you know, because I know you guys are limited on time, right? Like you on a race, on a test like this, you got all the time in the world, right? But like on a race weekend, you got like 30 minutes. So like, how do you know what it is? How do you pinpoint what it is? Or you just like, based on your experience, you just...
If the first thing you would do is, on a race weekend, is like if you went straight out on the racetrack and you had, a comment about something like this chatter.
Yeah.
And it was loud, because we can usually gauge how bad the problem is by the volume and the tone of voice of the riders and their body language when they come off a track.
Wow, you're like a psychologist.
A little bit. Well, you got to use a little bit of that, right? But then what you do is you quickly, at the wall, you make a command decision. Like if he says, oh man, it's chattering its brains out, I don't like it, I don't really like the feel, and you look at the data if you have time. But if not, the quickest thing to do is to throw another tire at it.
Okay.
They're the easiest things to change that are going to make the biggest difference.
Right.
Right. And at this particular racetrack, we're kind of handcuffed because we can pretty much only use one front tire.
Okay.
Right. So if we have a problem, then we're going to have to try to work around this. But sometimes, like I said, it can be that just that particular tire at that particular moment was giving you that problem. So
wow,
we'll find out here in a minute, because he's out running around.
Do you you were a racer before you were a crew chief guy, Superbike Sherpa. Do you draw from that from your racing experience to like help you with guiding all this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it's the ability to put yourself in the rider's place. Okay. Right? I'm not going to tell the rider that this is what I would do.
Right.
I'm going to say, in my head, I usually say, well, I've been in this situation before of my own, so I can relate to what he's talking about, so I know sort of the severity of what we're dealing with. Okay. And again, you get to know the riders pretty well, so you can start to see patterns with them, and that if this is a big problem, is this going to be a deal breaker problem, or is this something that we can manage?
So it's important. Am I getting this right? Is that it seems like it's very important for you to be more of an active listener than try to put what your experience is into the bike. Like, you have to be more of a listener and actually listen to what the rider has to say.
You have to be a listener. You have to be able to judge the nuances that they bring.
Yeah.
Right? And each rider has their own.
Okay.
And it takes a little bit of time working with riders to start to try to understand that. In the beginning, when you first start working with a rider, you are prone to be making bigger adjustments than maybe is necessary, because you don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
But after a while, you understand the subtleties of the rider and what they want and what they're looking for, and you can tell by the look on their face, like I said, how bad that problem is, really.
Yeah.
So,
dude, thank you. Appreciate you, John.
All right.